Hello everyone, today I'm going to be teaching you how to make a wire clasp that ranges from simplistic to a bit more complex. Materials that you want to have on hand will be 18 gauge wire. You can use thicker wire, but I wouldn't recommend going any lower than 18 gauge. Or rather any thinner than 18 gauge. For anyone newly familiar with wire wrapping, the way that wire gauges work is that the lower the number, the thicker the wire. So 18 gauge is thicker than 20 gauge, but thinner than 16. So I hope that helps whenever you're out shopping for wire. But yeah, it's so, and you can also use square or round. The wire I'll be working with today is Parawire. I love this stuff. It's a nice enameled wire, doesn't tarnish or irritate you if you have metal allergies, and it's reasonably affordable. Both of these spools I got from Hobby Lobby, so it's readily available for anyone with a Hobby Lobby or a Michaels near them. Also, beads, 4mm or larger, just whatever you want to work with. I just have some little metal, little fluted brass beads. And then nylon jaw pliers for straightening and work hardening your wire. Round nose pliers, because I've yet to find a tool better for making loops, and wire snips or flush cutters. Also, optional tools are a hammer and anvil for if you want to flatten or texture the wire clasp that you make. So we're going to start off with learning the basic technique to just make a small wire clasp. For this one in particular, you're going to want about 1.5 inches of wire. Now if you want to make a larger clasp, use more wire, but I don't know, I kind of like that size for, it's what I enjoy working with. So here we have our length of wire, and using your round nose pliers, grip the wire as close to the end as you can, and then twist your hand around. I'm going to wait for the camera to go into focus, if it will. There it goes. So you'll twist the wire around into a partial loop, and then using the box hinge of my round nose pliers, I just put it in, and squeeze down, and this acts to bring the ends together to make it a nice little loop end. And I like doing this because it makes it to where it won't snag, and it's easily inserted through the loop of the closure. And then again, grip the wire as close to the end as you can. Here I have it snugged up right against the loop that we just made. And then I bend the wire around my round nose pliers, like that. And now it's a bit of a hook. Then with the hook facing you, come in about 1 centimeter from the tip of your round nose pliers and grip the wire as close to the end as you can. And then using a twisting motion just in your hand and wrist, rotate the wire away from you, which is going to act to give you this loop around the pliers. Now it's very important here that you do make it a flush closure right there, because otherwise whenever you put this clasp on your work, like especially if you used like Acuflex or Tiger Tail beading wire and just hooked this through the wire, if there's a bigger closure, then your stringing material will just slip out of the loop. Okay, so there's a simple basic clasp. Now at this point you can go in with your nylon gel pliers, and I just squeeze it, and that flattens it, you know, gets it to where any misshaping that happened. But you could also, at this point, you could hammer it flat. Now we're going to move on, and I'm going to show you how to make a double-ended clasp, or an S-hook. And these are nice for if you're making something and like for sale, or for someone that you don't know if they're left or right-handed, because then it can be up to them which end that they hook and unhook on the necklace or bracelet. And also, it's a little bit fancier of a clasp. Now for this one, you'll want 3 inches of wire. You can either use your fingers or your nylon gel pliers to straighten the wire. Then I measure out 3 inches. Come here, wire. And now I'm going to use the same tactic that we just learned, gripping the wire as close to the end as you can. And then twisting it around to make a half loop. And then use the box hinge of your pliers to smush down. And now this is just what works for me. You may want to experiment with different tools that you have on hand and see what works best for you. And now that we have this loop down here, I'm going to make another loop on the other end facing the opposite direction. So this loop is going to the right, so I'm going to make this loop go to the left. So I'm just going to grip it at the very tip of my pliers as close to the end of the wire as I can get it. And then you'll twist around, making a little half loop. I'm actually going to bring it around a little bit more than that. Oops. And then put it up into the box hinge of your pliers and just squish it down. It's very, very scientific for sure. To make just a little loop end that my camera won't focus on. Anyways, so yeah, you make a little loop end, and then you'll grip the wire close to the loop, and then bend it around like that. And then you'll go to the other end and grip the wire very close to the loop and bring it around. And now you'll notice on this one, I told you wrong, to do this design where it's just an S-hook, you'll only use 2 inches. I'm sorry, I told you wrong. Whereas for this one, it has some extra space. So what we're going to do is take our pliers, our round nose pliers, and grip it in the center of the wire, and then twist one end around, and then twist the other end around in the other direction. Now I'm not moving my pliers at all. I'm just kind of holding it as a stationary point and then moving the rest of the wire around that. So you can see how it made this little loopy design And then I'll just remove the pliers. And you can flatten it out. And that makes just a nice little decorative clasp. I think these clasps, I like using them the best whenever I make an all wire bracelet, because it kind of, it makes it just as fancy as the rest of it, without introducing new materials. And then to make a fancier clasp, like this one, I use about 5 inches of wire. I love these little quilting boards as work surfaces because I try to save wire wherever I can. And by getting a little bit precise on my measurements, it helps me to keep from wasting. So you'll just go through and make one end, just like how you do in all of the other hooks. You make that little loop, and then wrap it around your pliers to make the hook. And now this is where, before you make the other end, you'll want to add the bead. And you'll just slide that right on there. And whenever you're shopping for beads, it'll be important that it will actually fit on the wire. I don't have too much problems with a lot of my 4mm beads because on the 18 gauge wire, but if you're using like a 16 or 14 gauge, like something that's substantially thicker, you'll want to make sure that your bead will fit on there, because otherwise it won't fit. And so you'll come through and make the half loop and smush it down. And the reason why I use this strategy, or this tactic rather, to make the little looped ends is because it ends up making a loop on the tip that's smaller than what I could manage to make if I just made a loop on the tip of my pliers. Excuse me. And so you'll smush it up, flush with the loop, and then form a hook. Here you'll see both of my hooks are facing the same direction, if you can see that. And that's a problem. I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold one end of each one and twist it, so that now the little shepherd's hooks are going in opposite directions, which that's important because I just think it looks better than that, than if they were both going the same direction. And you don't want to twist and mangle your wire too much. But and again though, if you like it like that, then by all means do it that way, because you're the artist here. You're the one who gets to do artist discretion. So now you'll have the beads centered on your wire, and this is kind of similar to making just the fancy loop one, in that you're moving one end in one direction and the other end in the other, but instead of your pliers in the center, you have the bead. So I'm just going to bend that one around. Like that. And then I'm going to take the other end and bend it in the opposite direction. And so I have kind of this twist of wire going on. And then I just continue the hooks around until the wire's wrapped as much as I want it to be. And this is a point in the wire wrapping process where your own personal style starts to emerge, and it becomes truly unique to you as an artist. So there's that one. And I like using this style of wire clasp whenever I do a wire wrapped bracelet that has a lot of beads on it. Like, you could use a gemstone bead there that matches the gemstones in the bracelet. And it's just a nice way of making it fancier, maybe making the clasp the focal point as opposed to having, a larger bead or something else on the bracelet or necklace. And it really helps tie it in. And so yeah, I really hope y'all found this tutorial helpful.